Good evening. It is Sunday, December 13th, year 2020, 11:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Mark Kulak. My show is Houstonic Live. We are in central Massachusetts in this year of the eternal election, the eternal lockdown, the eternal pandemic. By the way, at this show we do at the intersection of tech, politics, and history. I have a background in data storage analysis, a competitive analyst for several big tech companies. So I tend to find the history of the evolution of technology and how it has impacted modern day, in particular over the last 50, 100 years or so, to be very interesting. And a lot of these topics seem to be remarkably undercovered, or in most of our history books, if they're even covered at all. And there's one particular case, a legal case, which has captivated me. Now, I'm not an expert on it yet, but I've read plenty of articles. I'm going to read a bunch live tonight. Some actually going to be reading for the first time with you guys. And it is the GTE-Zettl case. And I'm saying the last name Zettl. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but Z-E-T-T-L. The GTE-Zettl case from the 1980s. You've heard of Iran-Contra. That gets a lot of attention. But you might not have heard of Operation Ill Wind. And that doesn't mean that someone had too many bad tacos. Operation Ill Wind was a sting that was done in the late 1980s into 1990. I'd like to think it's well intended, but right now you don't really know when it comes to our Department of Justice and FBI. And no offense to the good people in there, I'm from a police family, so please, we're cool, okay? You individuals. On my mom's side, anyways. And it was a sting to identify a lot of inappropriate, unethical, illegal sale of state secrets and information from the Pentagon being acquired and used by defense contractors. It was a big deal. Anyways, there's this middle case between that has a little bit of the flavor of Iran-Contra and a little bit of the flavor of this Operation Ill Wind, and it got headlines at the time. But these days, it has virtually disappeared. It's very hard to find information on it. So I've been working many, many hours to coalesce whatever we could and put it back together. And this case is GTE-Zettl case. And Bernie Zettl is the name that the Zettl comes from. Bernie Zettl was a vice president of sorts, senior director of planning at Dynalectron. Dynalectron Corporation, that's D-Y-N-A-L-E-C-T-R-O-N. Dynalectron Corporation, think of the D-Y-N-C-O-R-P, was rebranded in 1987, 1988 to be DynCorp. So he was a senior director and planner there in the 1960s, 1970s. And then Bernie Zettl became a contractor of sorts to many military industrial companies. He was in the Air Force for nearly 20 years, a test pilot, made up to the ranks of major. Now, the GTE case involved a few other people, and that was a subdivision of GTE. GTE ultimately became Verizon. So this is the predecessor to Verizon, was GTE. And there was a subsidiary of GTE, and I'm simplifying right now. I probably can actually clarify it when I reread some of these things to you. This subsidiary of GTE, which GTE became Verizon, was focusing on defense contracts. Oddly enough, this is a telephone company, and they have a defense contracting wing. Anyways, there were individuals within this GTE division who were in contact with Pentagon officials. And they were getting information from the Pentagon that many people in Congress couldn't even get. And this information was being sold to, provided to other defense contractors within the United States. This is what it's claimed, to help them know how to best invest, how to best do their research. Where did they stand on current bids, on potential future contracts? Now, I'm sure there was a whole lot more than that, but that's what we can say. Okay, I get it. Insider trading type stuff, insider baseball. And Bernie Zettl with two other people. But Bernie Zettl was the main person who these charges went against in 1984, 1985. The case dragged on for several years, and then charges were eventually mostly dropped, but then there was a part of it carried on, and eventually it was cleaned up. And I think Bernie Zettel, he might have had some fines towards the end. Anyways, it created this air of mistrust of defense contractors and their relations with the Pentagon, and it was one of the things which motivated Operation Ill Wind, which many people say is only slightly behind Iran-Contra. It doesn't sound as fantastic. Iran-Contra, you got narcotics, and Contras, and all the glitz that went along with it, but Operation Ill Wind was a very, very big deal at its time in the early 90s. GTE went on to become Verizon Corporation, and there were some mergers and there were some divisions of GTE which were sold off. GTE acquired, during the 1980s, 1990s, a company called BBN, which was a critical part of the early implementations of our internet. So it's not as if GTE was just a dying phone company. They had some serious packet switch data network infrastructure, pioneering type stuff. GTE went on to become Verizon. Now follow me here. This is the same GTE that had some contractors involved in this acquiring of Pentagon insider information and then selling it out or using it themselves even. The person who became chief counsel of GTE in 1994 was none less than the current United States Attorney General Bill Barr. Bill Barr then went on to become an executive vice president of Verizon, focusing on legal issues. Okay, everyone in D.C., you do your government job, and then you take a role in private industry, and that's where you get the big money. It's corrupt. It's bad. It is what it is. I've seen a lot of people who do even just local government jobs. And sometimes after you do the job for 5, 10, 30 years, you just happen to have the right connections, and you take a few years of a good pay, and you help other people put business deals together. It is what it is. It's how the world works. I get it. But this is something more than just Bill Barr finding a good job, which paid really well. This GTE, what they were involved in was these connections with the Pentagon. This inside baseball stuff. And what's even more troubling is this GTE corporation with these subsidiaries that they had purchased, like BBN. Then those subsidiaries became a key part of our internet infrastructure, of the world's internet infrastructure, really. Some of that technology. And those units, like the BBN, was sold off. It became a company called Genuity, were eventually purchased by another company, which were purchased by CenturyLink. CenturyLink is ultra critical in the implementation of the internet's backbone. CenturyLink started off many years ago as a diversified subsidiary of a major construction company out of Nebraska called Kiewit. And Kiewit Diversified Group, as doing major infrastructure, eventually realized, hey, you might as well get involved in the data networks because you're going to need to use that heavy equipment for it, for both land-based installations as well as maybe some days you're going to need some specialized equipment to lay the cables across the oceans. Now, I don't know what additional equipment, but you get my drift here, no pun intended. And then Kiewit, Peter Kiewit Jr., now you immediately have to think of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, one of the world's top billionaires, who is the mentor of Bill Gates. Follow me through here. It's time to really take seriously the role that United States Attorney General Bill Barr has had with the course of U.S. policy and over the last 40 years. We know that he had a senior intelligence role in his 20s in China at the right-hand side of Bush Sr. We know that he's been close with China for a very long time. We know that he really, really, really likes Joe Biden. We know that Joe Biden is really, really close with China, with his family role in several capital investment opportunities. And we know that Bill Barr also has these allegiances, which go back generations, before he was even born, to the Sachs family, his great-uncle Alexander Sachs, or really all the way to the crown. And as we said, Bill Barr, that senior role at GTE and then Verizon for many years, where he was making like $1.5 million a year. Although I think Bill Barr is actually at a level of a power where money is irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. Okay, at some point, this GTE case opens up a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in it. But the role of Bernie Zettel here, I really want to understand. With this GTE-Zettl case. And the bit of the spoiler alert is that Bernie Zettel's wife, and Bernie Zettel and his wife have both passed by now. But Bernie Zettl's wife lived 3 blocks away from Bill Gates' dad in Bremerton. She was only 2 years younger, and her dad and Bill Gates' granddad were both on the Chamber of Commerce and government within Bremerton, so the families would have known each other. I walked it through on Google Maps. The Zettl family was very much connected to Bremerton, and also is in Omaha for many years. Omaha, Nebraska, and now you have to think of Buffett. And then he's working for GTE. GTE is purchased by Genuity and then CenturyLink, and now it's a Kiewit. So Kiewit Construction, again out of Omaha, which then brings us back to, well, what's Warren Buffett's role with that? And also, this GTE case, and I'm dumping a lot of stuff on you here. This GTE case, there was actually a flavor of it a few years beforehand, where there were executives at Boeing, also Washington State, Boeing, who were going to the Pentagon and were getting inside information, which they were then bringing back and using to guide roadmaps, product roadmaps, investments at Boeing. A lot of it had to do with the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Anyways, the one person that took the biggest fall for that initially in 1979, 1980 was a fellow named Benjamin Plymale. And he was a senior director of advanced research at Boeing. Ben Plymale was a good friend and mentor of Thomas Rona. Thomas Rona's wife, Monique Rona, introduced Bill Gates, Paul Allen, Gary Kildall, and several other people 6.5 years before Microsoft was even incorporated. And she would have known Bill Gates' mom as well from the University of Washington, because that's where she was an assistant director of the computer lab there. And then this is me in the year 2024 injecting an update. It is this Thomas P. Rona who, as deputy director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy in 1987, put in a request and made suggestions for the Human Genome Project and the sequencing of the human genome to be run out of the United States Department of Energy. And this is after a significant debate about the future security environment of the United States of America, a debate which included everyone from Henry Kissinger to Joshua Lederberg to Dov Zakheim and many people related to 9/11, and overseen, of course, by Andrew Marshall, a working group established in the mid-1980s that definitely saw, as Thomas Rona probably also saw, that the future of warfare is not about tanks and airplanes. It's about computers and genetics. And a lot of money was being locked up in the United States military, and there needed to be more money shifted to and invested in computing, semiconductors, and of course those two things were key to researching and advancing the understanding of the human genome. And that's really where this all starts to come together. But let's go back to me 4 years ago in 2020. So the links are very small and thin at first, but when you see a couple, you usually find many, many, many more. And if I can give one research tip here to you for the other researchers out there who are trying to find out what really happened and take advantage of this gold rush opportunity to build a real history, it is to be detailed and to be methodical, to spend the time to organize and get and dot those I's and cross the T's in the process of putting all the meticulous little details together. It seems so boring. When you find that stuff, your brain will relax and you're going to see amazing things in the data that you've collected and the stuff that you're researching that you never would have seen otherwise. When you just throwing stuff together and you just reading, there's a lot that you miss. It's the little tiny, boring, subtle details that will usually be the most important things that you ever find. And you only really get to see those when you relax and do the boring work. Anyways, that's my research tip for you. And the several articles I want to read, right? I've been told I put people to sleep in a complimentary kind of way. So just let me lull you to sleep. And then after you sleep, you get some Z's, you're recharged. Then you can listen. All right, so let's go to, we're going to open up GTE Corporation. I have a new page for our Bernie Edward Zettl. There he is. This was a 1968 photo of Bernie Zettl. And another person who was a major player on this GTE case was a Walter Roy Edgington. Where's the best article I can find on this here? Find every little scrap piece of information I could find on these guys here. The 1985 article. Jury indicts GTE trio in defense fraud case. This is from the Arizona. This is a shorter article here, and then we'll read a more detailed one. A federal grand jury has indicted 3 GTE officials for conspiring to obtain and use secret Pentagon documents to get government contracts, the Justice Department announced. Attorney General Edwin Meese, by the way, I think was the president of the Council of National Policy at one point. Attorney General Edwin Meese said the Justice Department also charged the defense arm of the company, GTE Government Systems Corporation, in a separate action with an additional count of conspiracy. The Pentagon said Tuesday the Waltham, Massachusetts company, which manufactures electronic warfare equipment, will plead guilty to the charge that it used the classified internal documents, quote, to defraud the United States government, unquote. The indictment, returned in U.S. District Court in Alexandria, Virginia, charged a consultant, and 2 company officials with illegally obtaining sensitive Pentagon budget documents that, quote, reflect the potential procurement of the department and contain proprietary and classified information, unquote. Those officials used the inside information to help the company obtain government contracts, the indictment said. The indictment also charged the 3 with unauthorized possession of a classified document, using a section of the law normally reserved for espionage cases. The separate count of conspiracy charged against the company said GTE officials took extraordinary steps to conceal their activity, the Justice Department said. Named as defendants in the 5-count indictment were Robert Carter, age 55, of Mountain View, California, a former GTE employee who was a marketing manager of the Electronic Warfare Organization of GTE's Western Division. Remember, GTE becomes Verizon. Walter Edgington, 60, of Annandale, Virginia, a GTE vice president for marketing with offices in Rosslyn, Virginia. And Bernie Zettl, Zettl, age 62, of McLean, Virginia, a consultant doing business as Zettl Associates with offices in Virginia. If convicted, GTE Government Systems Corporation faces a maximum fine of $10,000. The individuals indicted face fines and sentences up to $30,000 and 25 years in prison. So here's a much longer article here. So this is a September 11th and here's September 12th. But I just kept on digging and digging and digging. Here's actually a slightly older version of the article, 1984. This is 1988. This is a future article, so we won't do that one just yet here. This is 1988. So this is 4 years later. Again, things are dragging along. It just so happens that this particular update is July 4th, 1988, and on this day, the United States accidentally downed an Iranian jet airliner. You notice a lot of jets tend to get shot down on critical days of announcements in U.S. news. I've noticed this pattern, like the day Skip Jackson died, the senator, the neo-conservative Democrat senator from the state of Washington, who was close with Governor Daniel Evans of the state of Washington and probably knew Bill Gates' father. Scoop Jackson died only a few hours after the Russian airplanes were claimed to have accidentally shot down a Korean jet airliner. Not saying the two are related. It could have been a stress that caused Scoop Jackson to have a heart attack that day, only a few hours after the downing of that plane. And then, of course, Daniel Evans took Scoop Jackson's job as senator, from one of the two senators from the state of Washington and D.C. So let's read this article here. This is going to be a much longer article. Trading defense data becomes a way of life. And again, we are talking about the GTE-Zettl case here, as it came to be known as. And then later on, this morphs into additional investigations, which become Operation Ill Wind. An Operation Ill Wind has been considered by many textbooks to be only slightly behind Iran-Contra in scale. Interesting note here. One of the three names mentioned in this case, this GTE case, of course, there's Bernie Zettl, who's going to be the one person that they do not drop charges against. They convict him of one thing. The other fellow, his last name is Edgington, Walter Edgington. And Walter Edgington's lawyer, coincidentally, was the same lawyer that Oliver North had for Iran-Contra. Same lawyer. Almost at the same time, too. It's like the same lawyer was helping out Walter Edgington with the GTE case and then went out to help Ollie North. A lot of cross-pollination here. All right, 1988. Trading defense data becomes a way of life by Christopher Drew. Walter Edgington, a marketing official for GTE Corporation, wasn't ruffled in March of 1984 when two investigators from the Defense Department stopped by to question him about evidence that a private consultant was providing GTE with unauthorized copies of secret Pentagon documents. "You don't have to explain," Edgington said. "I know why you are here, and so does everyone else on my office." Edgington then told the agents that it long had been commonplace for defense contractors to collect such material, according to a summary of the interview prepared by one of the agents. In fact, Edgington said, so many secret government reports were floating around the office when he joined GTE in 1966 that he had assigned an aide to, quote, pull all the documents in the file room so they could at least be controlled, unquote. "Every major corporation gets the same material," the executive declared. Edgington also acknowledged that he never tried to stop the practice, which the investigators considered illegal industrial espionage. "If you already have your feet in the mud," Edgington said, "why take a shower? You still can't get rid of the past dirt." I don't know if he actually spoke like that. This is just my projection. As Edgington's colloquial analogy suggests, trading in secret documents and inside information on government contracts has been part of life for some of the nation's largest defense contractors for at least 2 decades. Federal law enforcement officials have revealed in the past, and this is the next part of the article here. And yes, oh my goodness, is that Charles Grassley? Is that Senator Charles Grassley involved in this? It's kind of funny how Charles Grassley is, he's always that guy who's there to save America, right? He's always the tip of the spear on some of the most controversial things. He's excellent with asking the tough questions, pursuing the justice that other people in Congress are just too fearful to pursue. He writes those tough letters. He digs. He finds information about the Hillary Clinton emails. He digs on the GTE case. And then he doesn't freaking do anything with it. Oh, my goodness. Is that Victoria Toensing? That's Victoria. Look at young Victoria. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Look, she's there too, fighting for justice. Just wait. You just wait there, because the heroes, the patriots with the capes, are going to save you. Continued. 3 weeks that a massive new investigation in the defense industry had uncovered evidence of widespread fraud, bribery, and misuse of classified documents. Evidence in this unfolding inquiry suggests that the award of a significant portion of the Pentagon's $160 billion annual procurement budget. Oh, that's supposed to procurement budget. Maybe that's not the full operating budget. I'm sorry. procurement budget may be corrupted by these techniques. The disclosures have focused intense public attention on the defense companies and their consultants, but they have also rekindled a bitter controversy over why the Justice Department waited so long to mount a comprehensive attack on such practices. Yes, remember, there was this same type of thing happened specifically with a senior person from Boeing Corporation, Benjamin Plymale, Plymale. He was like their director of advanced technology and also a peer and a mentor of Thomas Rona, whose wife was involved with the Microsoft founders. Oh, yeah, and Thomas Rona was connected with all... Remember, Thomas Rona, mentored by Plymale, who was involved in the Boeing case. It just so happened, though, that in his college thesis, this thesis that was required for his PhD, almost every single person who was involved in BBN, the company that created data switching networks, hence ultimately became the data network that the GTE bought, were at MIT and helped him out with his college paper. It's just odd. It's just odd how these people just keep popping up. Names that you won't find in Wikipedia. Why is that? Senator Charles Grassley, Republican from Iowa, has renewed charges he made in 1985 that the government's procurement fraud unit, created with great fanfare in 1982, bungled the investigation in which Edgington was interviewed by failing to vigorously pursue his and others' suggestions of rampant cheating. The unit is directed by the Justice Department and uses investigators from the Pentagon and other agencies. Robert Segal, assuming not related to the actor, a former official, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service and supervisor of the agents who interviewed Edgington, said it was incomprehensible to him in 1985 when prosecutors showed little interest in leads, suggesting that as many as 25 defense contractors were receiving unauthorized copies of classified military planning documents. 3 other investigators familiar with the case said in interviews that they also had picked up a number of inferences in 1983 and 1984 that industry consultants were giving bribes and gratuities, such as trips to Las Vegas, to Pentagon employees ranging from clerks and secretaries to career military officers in exchange for the documents. These investigators, who asked not to be identified, conceded that they had little hard evidence of bribery, but Segal and the other 3 all said that they were very confident that they would have developed such evidence if Justice Department officials had sought court authorization for wiretaps or assigned more than a handful of agents to the inquiry. By contrast, nearly 100 FBI and naval investigative agents are working on the current investigation, which is being coordinated by Henry Hudson, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. They have recorded about 4,800 conversations through wiretaps, including nearly 700 deemed to be incriminating. As it turns out, in the GTE case, a federal grand jury directed by prosecutors working for the procurement fraud unit in September of 1985 indicted GTE Edgington, a former GTE marketing manager Robert Carter, and Barr Electronic, the consultant who allegedly had supplied the company with these documents. The jury charged that the 3 men and the company, which makes electronic warfare equipment, had conspired for nearly 7 years to defraud the government of, quote, the right to have its procurement process conducted free from improper and unauthorized conversion and utilization by prospective contractors of Department of Defense documents which contain proprietary and classified information, unquote. It also accused Zettl, Edgington, and Carter of violating statutes on espionage and theft of government property. At the time of the indictments, this would be 1983 and 1984, I assume, the indictments of a major defense firm and its consultants on such charges was virtually unprecedented. GTE swiftly pleaded guilty and agreed to pay a fine of $580,000. Sounds like they wanted this one to disappear, and to develop a policy against future misuse of government documents. Zettl, Eddington, and Carter pleaded innocent, and their cases soon became entangled in prolonged disputes over whether it would pose a national security risk to introduce some of the classified documents into evidence. Oh my goodness, it's going to be a risk. We can't make this a public case. Oh my God. It's like the more things change, the more they don't change. The prosecutors eventually had to drop the espionage and theft counts against Zettl and all of the charges against Eddington and Carter because they could not agree with defense lawyers on a compromise plan to substitute summaries for some of the secret materials. Oh my goodness. It's just going to be too much of a risk to national security. Oh, we just have to let the case go. Just can't prosecute. Sorry, too much of a risk. Zettl, a retired Air Force major, is still awaiting trial on the conspiracy charge. But the prosecutors never attempted to expand that investigation to seek charges against other companies. Senator Grassley said he believes this was simply because that inquiry was not directed by a very aggressive type person like Hudson. So it goes on. It gives you a little timeline here. It actually starts off in 1966. We're talking about Walter Eddington here, one of the other two people. Starts with GTE and so on and so forth. But the star of the show, and the one person who did have charges up until the end, is Bernie Zettl. This is a picture of him in 1968. Bernie Zettl was born in 1922. He grew up in St. Louis. His family then moved to Tennessee when he was a teenager. He started to work as a mechanic in one of the local plane factories. We can see his 1992 draft card. He is working for Fisher Aircraft. I'm not sure what role he had. You researcher tip, you can look at addresses and you can usually extrapolate. He seems to have a very blue-collar type job. So he joins the military. This is World War II. We can tell he's down in Mississippi, Biloxi. Caught up here and has to pay a small fine, like $10 fine for gambling. No big deal. Look, he's just a regular guy, right? But then 1956, see, he would be 34 years old right now. He meets the love of his life, Charlene Olga Mikhail. And you can see that Bernie Edward Zettl, he's in Omaha at this time, and Charlene Olga Mikhail, she is 26 years old, and she is in Monterey, California. Later on, we looked at Charlene's passing, Charlene Olga Zettl. She was born Charlene Mikhail. She was a longtime resident from Bremerton, Washington. Longtime Bremerton family connected to the Navy Shipyard. Navy Shipyard. The Navy Shipyard. Isn't that where Dorm Brahman, the Seattle mayor and the scoutmaster of Bill Gates Sr., he lived right next to it. She attended Star and C at Bremerton High, class of 1948. Her first real job took her to Boeing, Seattle, as an administrative worker. There she met a dashing Air Force pilot, Bernie Zettl, who snuck her onto the prototype Boeing 707. That's a cool story. Come on, you got to admit that's pretty cool. These are the kind of stories I want to read about in the history books about Americans. Wearing a parachute on her first ever plane ride. They married a year later. So he was a test pilot. Their kid was a test pilot on F-11s, etc., etc., etc. But what matters here is if I go to 6th Avenue in Bremerton, and I have no life, if I can actually remember where different houses are in Bremerton. So this is the Navy Shipyard down here. And I know this corner here is where Bill Gates' grandfather had a furniture store. And a small mill here. And I know on this 6th Street here, the satellite view, I know that this was a custom Tudor house that was built by Dorm Brahman. And I know that this house here, right next to it, is the house that Bill Gates' dad grew up in. Matter of fact, Dorm Brahman was the scoutmaster of Bill Gates' dad. And this is 6th Avenue in Bremerton. And then I know that just a few blocks over, right over here, at this Midtown Market is where a house used to exist where Charlene Olga Mikhail grew up with her family. And her dad was in the Bremerton town government. along with it would have been Bill Gates' grandfather, who was in the Chamber of Commerce. Matter of fact, Bill Gates' dad was also a lawyer and also participated in the Chamber of Commerce when he was young in Bremerton before he moved to Seattle and helped his scoutmaster mentor, Dorn Brahman. Hence the introduction into Washington state politics and the 1962 World's Fair. Anyways, that's just pretty interesting, especially interesting because the other person who was involved in a GTE type case was Ben Plymale, and Ben Plymale mentor Thomas Rona, and now you have another connection, critical connection to the history of Microsoft with Thomas Rona and Monique Rona. So Bernie Zettl here, there's some fascinating stuff about him. There's a huge blank. You will not find anything that he did basically for 15 years. All you know is that he goes into World War II, and then he comes out 20 years later a major, having done research. We know through his wife's obituary that he was a test pilot, and that's it. So he's doing some top secret stuff, and if there was any other things, trust me, they've been wiped. However, 1963 comes along. Bernie Zettl, here he is. Dynelectron, remember Dynelectron? Dynelectron, D-Y-N, Dynelectron Corporation, D-Y-N, and then C-O-R-P from corporation. Dynelectron Corporation becomes DynCorp. DynCorp, the company that has the advanced methods to convert coal to oil. DynCorp, that provides the IT for the government. DynCorp, who's involved in all kinds of other fun activities. That's DynCorp, starts with Dynelectron. Hard to find stuff when they're named Dynelectron. The appointment of Bernie E. Zettl as Director of Program Planning was announced recently by Charles G. Gulridge, President of Dynelectron, so the president of the company. Bernie Zettl, a veteran of 20 years with the Air Force and industry in weapon system management and systems research and development operations, will work closely with the Aerospace Operations Division of Dynelectron, which opened headquarters July 1st at 6000 Camp Drive. Here we are. This is 1963. Director of Program Planning. What are the odds that a Director of Program Planning at a company that's involved in the space missions at this point, then 20 years later, is simply a marketing consultant for GTE? Bernie Zettl. So 20 years later, the whole GTE thing is going down. He's simply a marketing consultant. Here, this is award ceremony. Here we see Bernie Zettl is giving an award to Dan R. Bannister. And there's a whole, I can find huge documents on this guy. He was the DynCorp CEO for a while. Computer History Museum has some great interviews with Dan R. Bannister. And who's giving the award? Wow, I don't know why. He moved up pretty fast. Bernie Zettl. More interesting is that Bernie Zettl was one of a few people who was a founder of something called the Association of Old Crows. The AOC, the Association of Old Crows, which is something that most people probably have never heard about. I sure as hell never heard about it. The AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. By the way, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of the, the squad, have been some of the only people that have actually called out for real investigations into 9/11. Say what you will. Give them credit when credit's due. Anyways, so here we are. The Association of Old Crows, AOC. Electronic warfare. Electronic warfare men gather in, I think this is San Antonio. Yeah. Communist forces in North Vietnam were using radar to direct fire of anti-aircraft guns and missiles against attacking American planes. That was electronic warfare. The experts call it EW. Remember, it's a 1968 article. Americans devised a new kind of equipment called RHW for radar homing and warning, and went out to locate and destroy enemy radar systems in an effort codenamed Project Wild Weasel. That was a venture in electronic countermeasures, or ECM. The communists had a reply, however, they turned off their radar and disappeared. That came under the heading of electronic countermeasures, or ECCM. U.S. experts in the tricky, sophisticated, and still largely secret field of work with electronic warfare and its many variants gathered in San Antonio Wednesday, 1968, for 2 meetings, which will continue through Friday. And one is a North American Air Defense Command Electronic Warfare Convention. The other one is the 5th annual convention of the Association of Old Crows, a group of military and industrial people with interests in the field, meeting at the Hilton Palacio, I guess. Let's see here. I want to find some more details here. I mean, they're talking about the flying U-2 reconnaissance flights. They're radar missiles in North Korea. They cover the ground here. Arguing over the approach. Electronic warfare men talk of ELINT, or electronic intelligence, and ComSec, communication security, and a valued thing called QRC, which is quick reaction time, the ability to build or adapt equipment quickly to meet a needed revealed by SIGINT, signals intelligence, both communications and non-communications. They argue, Bernie Zettel says, so they've interviewing him, over whether or not the best ECM approach against enemy radar should be to jam it with noise, which the Air Force likes, or deceive it with false signals, which the Navy goes for. It goes on to say that this group is an association of, eventually becomes like a group of nearly 40,000 people. So this is the electronic warfare enthusiasts, experts, going back all the way back to World War II, and they created this association of old crows. And Bernie Zettel was the president. He was one of the 2 or 3 people that founded it. And for several years, I think up until the 1970s, 1974, Bernie Zettel was the president of the Association of Old Crows, the AOC. And then many, many years later, yes, it was Bernie Zettel who was the only person that was ultimately convicted of any charges related to the GTE case. Starting in 1983 and ended in 1989, 1990. And that's Bernie Zettel. Bernie Zettel, who married a woman from Bremerton who grew up 3 blocks away from Bill Gates' dad. Bernie Zettel, who's the case that he was involved in. The only similar case previous to that involved a Benjamin Plymale, who was the mentor of Thomas Rona, who again brings you back to Microsoft. The GTE case, GTE purchased BBN. BBN, the creators of the packet switch network, which, by the way, were also the same people who were part of Thomas Rona's college thesis to become a doctor at MIT. GTE, which then becomes Verizon? GTE, where who was the executive? Who was that executive of the legal counsel of GTE? It just happened to be Bill Barr. And then Bill Barr becomes an executive vice president for Verizon. Isn't that interesting? GTE, who after buying this company BBN then goes on to become, oh my goodness, they get split off and they're bought by Kiewit of Omaha, Kiewit Diversified Group, and then they become CenturyLink.
And the links just go on and on and on. But I think that going down that path does get away from where we want to take this particular series. Look out in the upcoming weeks for more updates to this series. And as you can imagine, this is actually going to touch on several other threads of research. Of course, it includes issues related to the Manhattan Project and atomic weapons. Of course, it's going to include the push for military dollars and other technology spending of the United States government to go into genomics during the 1980s and the 1990s. And of course, it does involved the family of Bill Barr. And the bigger story there, amongst many stories, of course, is how several of the primary mythologies that seem to define history are all connected to one family that does have the power of the pen to write or to create fiction. And I think that's enough for this show. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to continuing this series and for you to continue to join this journey with me. Thank you very much, and God bless.